Good morning, class. Today I'll be talking about ethical violations and board discipline as it pertains to the ACA Code of Ethics and the state of Connecticut. So right away, looking over quarterly reports when it came to disciplinary actions that were the most common across the state of Connecticut when it came to certain medical professionals, whether it's clinical mental health counselors, drug counselors, I even included social workers in this category, was the issue with medical records, and then I quote here, professional ethics. Unfortunately, the website that goes over these violations doesn't get any more specific than that. But again, the main thing was medical records. And with that, that's not very surprising to me, simply because of, I'm sure there are large caseloads of clients that come through to counselors, especially if they're successful. And the more clients they get, the more their professional base grows and grows, and the more responsibility they have. Medical records could get way out of hand if not done properly along the way. If they're not documented properly, if they're not stored correctly, I could see there being a breach of confidentiality, maybe records being lost, not being terminated properly, all of those things. And so to me, that wasn't very surprising. Some of the common themes when it came to discipline was a fine, probation, and reprimand. That was pretty standard across the board. Maybe there was different ones in different orders, like maybe just fine and reprimand, or probation and reprimand. But for the most part, those three were utilized across the board, and that includes the most recent cases. Again, the website wasn't very specific on the behavior or what the actual action was in itself, just the general theme, unfortunately. Along with that, according to the ACA Code of Ethics and Rule A1B, and I quote here, it talks about counselors needing to create, safeguard, and maintain documentation necessary for rendering professional services. Other main categories along with that in B6A talk about just creating and maintaining records and documentation. And B6H talks about storage and disposal after termination. So my thought here is clearly records are important enough or are an important topic if they're being mentioned in the ACA Code of Ethics. So that's what the ACA Code of Ethics has to say about medical records and documentation. And then for the most common outcome in terms of what it looked like, it just, for the most part, either the counselor finished their probationary period or they didn't. There was no mention of any licensure suspension or anything beyond that, unfortunately. And then moving on to impairment. So the impairment, according to Connecticut as well as the ACA Code of Ethics, it's the job of the counselor to recognize in themselves and be honest with themselves when they've reached a level of impairment. And what's supposed to follow after that is the responsibility to take care of those issues, whether to seek help themselves, refrain from services, confide in peers, whatever that looks like. But if it comes to a point where they need to terminate the service for a small amount of time, that is the right thing to do according to the ACA Code of Ethics, because it could cause harm to the client. And I'm looking at Rule C2G to be specific. And what question that brings to my mind to conclude is impairment the main cause for disciplinary action? And what I mean by that is, does disciplinary action occur because of impairment for the most part? Does a counselor get to the point so much where they're overwhelmed, where they're out of focus, they're out of touch with their current profession, that it leads to sloppiness, it leads to a lack of judgment, whatever that is? But the thought there is, does it stem always from impairment? And I would say no, but that's just a question that I had in my mind. And then a follow-up question with that was, okay, so how do you prevent that? How do you prevent the impairment? That way you don't get disciplinary actions in the long run. How do you stay healthy? How do you stay focused on the needs of the client and the needs of the profession as a whole? So those are just some things that come to my mind. Those are just some of my thoughts. Thanks for taking the time to listen, and good luck as you continue in the course, guys.